Hello and welcome to Confetti's Industry Week 2021. Thank you so much for joining us, everybody. We've got the most amazing lineup all week across 3 curriculum areas. A massive thank you to Mandy Parnell, who's going to speak to us about mastering in a little minute. But don't forget, you can book on the rest of the talks for the rest of the week using iw.confetti.ac.uk and book on and share your experiences of the week using the hashtag IW21. Without further ado, welcome to an absolutely amazing platinum mastering engineer, Mandy Parnell, who's joining us live from her studio in London. Mandy, welcome.
Hello, thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for coming. Second time with us, is that right?
Second, third, maybe?
Wow.
Third time.
Returning
yeah.
guest. Thank you so much for coming.
I've been up a couple of times. This is a bit different though. Yeah, I'm not getting out of my box.
It is. Okay, so before we move on to your journey on how you got started, I think it would be really helpful to contextualise exactly what the mastering process is for our audience. So would you like to give us a little bit of an overview about what mastering is?
So mastering. When I started, 30 odd years ago, mastering engineers were a transfer engineer. So it was transferring from one medium to another. So when I started, it was going from reel-to-reel tape to vinyl. And then CDs came, we went through the whole transfer of DJs, not using vinyl in clubs so much, but using CDJs. And now we're onto streaming platforms, as well as still doing CDs, as well as still doing vinyl. So the mastering process is still very much about transferring. Where we have gone from people not working in big studios anymore. Years ago, they had to go into a recording studio to record their stuff and mix it. Now we have a lot more bedroom producers. And I suppose I grew up at the exchange with the bedroom producers and people not having acoustically treated rooms and having to become a lot more of a teacher and guide people through the mixing process. So now, it's a lot more artistic than when it was when I first came into the industry. When I first came in, it was very much about keeping the integrity of the mix. They'd spent a lot of money inside the studio, so we really did need to transfer it with the mix as best as possible. Whereas now, really depending on the production team will depend on whether we go more artistic with it or whether we try and keep it, a lot more audiophile. So the job's changed a lot for me, really. Yeah, but yeah, that's what mastering is. And if you think about it, we are, in a sense, the first set of objective is to the project. Most of the time people outside of the production team haven't heard the mixes. They come into a mastering room where the first objective is. So it's about giving feedback to the production team about that, very gently, normally, especially if we need to ask them to remix or change anything going forward. And what else is my job? Yeah, just a counsellor to the production team, guidance, sounding board, really, to guide.
Thank you. Lots to dig into later on that. So do you want to go back in time for to explain a little bit about your journey into the process? How did you get into mastering?
So how I got into wanting to work with audio, I was, a runaway, bit of a dysfunctional teenager due to, my home life growing up. And when I had a friend, Judy, who worked as a housekeeper at the Manor recording studio, which was in Oxford, Richard Branson's studio. This was in the 80s, so bands like Queen, Rush were down there, recording, mixing. And I'd go down occasionally and spend the weekend with her down there when there wasn't a lot going on in the studio. So I would, one weekend I went down there and the assistant engineer took me into a control room. And it was just like this. It was just this moment of, oh my God, what is this? You know, I didn't even know what stereo sound was. I'd listened to music since very young, was obsessed with records at, you know, sort of the age of 5. Would rather sort of listen to music than do anything else. I'd learnt to play music, piano, guitar through school, but didn't want to be in bands. That didn't interest me, but my passion was music. So I came back to London, looked at courses. We had 3 music production courses in the UK at the time. We had the Tom Meister course. I was 16. There was no way. I had no education. And, you know, I was never going to be able to get onto that course. We had a place called Gateway Music, which was South London. I was very punk rock, you know, came from Essex, East London. To go south was, you know, there was a lot of territorial stuff going on when we were teenagers, you know. So the thought of going to South London didn't really excite me. And SAE had just started. I think it was their 2nd year in the UK. So I was very lucky to be taught by the people that wrote the course for SAE, which, you know, they were incredible teachers. So I went to SAE, came out of there, worked for about 3-4 years for no money, just tape hopping, doing whatever I could to get inside the studio. And I was living with a singer called Stuart, who would always buy Music Week, which I hated this, you know, it was so business and so not rock and roll to me. And I was on the phone to one of my best friends who talks relentlessly. So I was flicking the pages and saw an advert for assistant mastering engineers at the Exchange. So got off the phone to her, it was late afternoon, called them up and they said, well, we're closing, accepting CVs tomorrow. At this point, I didn't have any more CVs typed out. Back then, you know, it was pre-computers, you know, so it wasn't like I could send them an email. You know, I didn't have a typewriter at home. It was late afternoon. I didn't have access to one, so I hand wrote a CV with spelling mistakes that I scribbled out, which, you know, I don't even remember. I just wrote it, drove up there, put it through the letterbox. Well, I was the joke interview because they couldn't believe that somebody would send in the CV, you know, all, you know, scriggly with, you know, scribbles. So they invited me along because they were interviewing, they interviewed over 100 applicants for 2 positions they were giving out. And during the interview, they did say that we are looking for a token woman. You know, it was during the Margaret Thatcher thing about getting women more into professional roles. So I didn't really think about it because I didn't care. You know, I just wanted to get where I wanted to get to. So I must have been so fierce. They kept me waiting over 2 hours for the interview. So I was a bit wound up because I was having to pay a parking meter and was worried I was going to get a ticket because I didn't have a lot of money. But 2 weeks later, they called me up and I got the job. And that was that. That was the start of the madness of mastering.
And then did you gradually become freelance, or were you straight at the deep end? Talk about a little bit about that.
So the Exchange had a great system. You spent 2 weeks in the copy room doing production parts. So again, like I said earlier, it was reel to reel. So it was doing reel to reel copies. Back then you would cut 1 set of vinyl for the UK, and then you would do a production master tape that would get sent to Europe. One would get sent to America, maybe to Australia, to different territories for the different cutting rooms to cut. A lot of times back then, it was just the start really of, I suppose, independent mastering studios, because prior to that, most of the record companies, the bigger record companies, would have their own cutting rooms. So yeah, it was the copy room. And then you'd spend 1 week sitting in with one of the mastering engineers. And I was very blessed because they put me in with Ray Staff, who had come from Trident Studios, which was a studio that I went by so many times asking them for a job. You know, it was my dream to go work at Trident. So to walk into the Exchange and my first teacher be Ray, who was the Trident cutting engineer, was incredible. So yeah, so I started there training. So Ray Staff, John Dent and Graham Durham. So John and Graham had come from the Sound Clinic, which was Island Records cutting room. And when they shut down Island Records cutting room, they got the equipment and they set up the exchange. And that's where I ended up. So yeah, very, very blessed. And then going freelance, what happened was, I went to America and got married, had a child, came back, got my job back at the exchange, and just worked through. And of course, digital audio was really coming up there, but we had all come very much from an analog point. So I ended up going back to SAE to learn about digital audio because none of the guys that were working at the exchange really understood that at the time. And just got to the point of really outgrowing the studio and, a lot of political things, people earning more money than me and me feeling, very let down by my boss with that. I was earning him a lot of money. I was tech support for a lot of the computer systems, on call a lot. And, they were earning considerably more money than me. So it started to cause like some political conflict. So I ended up leaving there, starting to set up my own room, and then went to work at another studio called Electric Mastering, help rebuild, the whole signal flow of that, sort out some of the acoustics there, was, planning to sort of go into partnership there. Got Guy, who I shared my room at the exchange, to come over there and work with me over there. And through a series of events, in my personal life, ended up not working there. And then setting up my own studio, at which point I got headhunted by Universal Mastering in America and really considered going out there. They were looking for a cutting engineer. Universal would outsource all their vinyl. And in America at that time, cutting engineers would be very fussy about the styles of music that they would cut. And my thing at the exchange, I would often cut a lot of the production parts that were coming from the American labels, like Jive, Interscope, so cut all these, incredible R&B, hip hop, and then going through to rock, classical, every style of music. So Universal were really looking for an in-house cutting engineer, but really close to the point I was going to move. My house was up for sale. I was looking at houses out there. I was ready to move. I just had a vibe and decided not to go. So then was going to lease a room. I was looking at different options to lease a room in London, and it was Sean Davis, one of my mentors, who said to me, why? The studio in your house is great. We'd done some acoustic work in here. We'd measured everything. He said, you're doing great records. I'd had a couple of number ones, across the world. He was like, what's the point of moving? You're at home, you're near your son. So that was it. I've just ended up staying here.
So your studio is in your house?
Yes, so I have a warehouse. I bought a warehouse in Walthamstow Village. And this room was designed for Phil, my husband at the time, God rest, we ended up separating. And he's passed now, but this was his writing room. He was a jazz musician from New Orleans. Yeah. So yeah, I had some equipment in here. He'd recorded albums here, but yeah, it wasn't really my mastering room. But then just over time, it became, my room.
Brilliant. So if we go back to the actual process of mastering, where does that fit in the chain of an artist doing an album? So an artist is going to do an album. Who gets in touch with you at what stage, and then how is your involvement developed?
It really depends on the project. Some people get in touch at the point that they've finished mixing, and they know that everything's finished and signed off, and then they'll book the mastering after that if they have time. Others will book it when they know they're booked in to do the final mixing, so they'll book it in for the following week. It really depends on, how big the production team is, record company management. So sometimes it'll be the artist, sometimes it will be the producer, the mix engineer, the manager, the record company. It really depends on what the project is, on when it's going to be booked in. And often you can find that you're up against deadlines, which are really hard to fill, and you work, sort of stupid to try and meet it. So sometimes they book an album in, but then they decide that 5 of the mixes aren't where they want them, so they go back in. So you're often juggling in mastering, sort of moving your diary around. It's quite juggling feat, really.
So when you're pulled into a job, what format do you ask for the mixes to be delivered to you in?
So I will ask them to be delivered at the sample rate that they've mixed at, 24-bit. I do try and encourage my teams to go to higher sample rates now. So if it's in their means to go up to 96K, that's my preferred medium. But if they've worked at other sample rates, I'll just say, send it to me at your sample rate. I'll ask for the stereo file. If they've done listening copies where they've made a pseudo mastered version with a limiter on, I'd like to hear them, because I've had so many problems where they haven't been sent to me. And because of the extremity of the limiters they put on, it really changes not only tone, but the dynamic range of the material. So I'll ask for that. Sometimes I might ask for split left and right, as well as stereo interleaved. If they're going to send it to me over the internet, I ask them not to zip it, to definitely not compress it, because even when you're sending over, say WeTransfer, Dropbox, just by the inherent way them platforms work, they're going to use some sort of zipping. So you can often hear the differences, if you get something zipped to unzipped. So I ask for it unzipped, and then, if they have references, that they've used through the project, because often, especially with the sort of younger production teams, they have references in the vein of music that they're working in. So I'll ask them to send the references through so I can sort of understand maybe a bit more behind what they're looking for.
And then once you receive all that, what do you do? What's the process? Is it mindful, where you are listening, closing your eyes, absorbing? Is it emotional? Is it technical? Is it all those things? But what sort of thing might you be going typically through?
So the first thing that we'll do is we'll set up the sessions. So I have a playback system, which often I will use Adhd to play back from, bring it into analog, and then capture it into Sequoia. So we will set it up on both systems, on Adhd and Sequoia. I will play back from Sequoia straight to my, through my converters into my speakers, because that's the most purest way that I can hear it, the closest way I suppose I'm going to hear what the production team have heard. And I will often just play it, in a sense, in the background. I won't be sitting at the board. I'll have a cup of coffee, probably sitting like this. To be honest with you, if I have the artists, producers, whoever with me, this will be the time that we play back. And yeah, we're just chatting through it. I'll be getting the story of what the project was for them. And what I find when you listen in that way, without being this very hyper focus on the sound, that you will often hear things that are wrong a lot quicker. It'll make your body react. You'll be like, oh, what was that? And if clients are here with me, I'm often looking at their body language, seeing how they're responding to the sound in the room. All right, it's not their space, but I've only had a couple of people that have come in here that haven't related to my system. Most people can relate. So yeah, it's about looking at what's affecting them, what they're thinking. So I'll do a playback of the project, maybe once, maybe twice. Sometimes, I could play it 5-6 times before I actually sit down and engage with it. It really depends on the style of music, on, how it's making me feel, deciding what direction I'm going to go in. The thing is with mastering engineers, if you think when I went to exchange from the point of walking in there to the point of being totally 100% confident in everything I was doing, bearing in mind that I did learn to cut vinyl. So that's a very physical medium and tape, you know, there's a lot more to learn with that than just working with digital audio. You know, all the guys said to me, it's about a 10-year, learning curve. So the thing is about a mastering engineer, we have a huge arsenal of music that we've listened to, and understood, if that makes sense, production wise. So when I'm playing back, I'm often sort of thinking about if they've sent me references, what their references are, looking back in my arsenal, of stuff that I've heard, going, okay, that sort of triggers that emotion in me like that, and thinking about that. I do work very much on the emotion. I'm very much of the viewpoint that there's nothing perfect. There's no perfect mix, That's just, to me, a misconception. We have things that sound really good that we can go, yeah, it's got really good balance, but we're always going to be able to find fault in everything, if that makes sense. So to me, if we follow the emotion, we're probably going to nail it a lot better than, if we try and make something perfect. If that makes sense.
So if you give me a little bit more of an example. So let's say we've got an indie rock ballad. We've sent it to you in the styles of Kings of Leon. It's making us cry a little bit. There's your cat in the background. Hello, cat. Acoustic cat. It's making us all really emotional. It's making us all really emotional. So you're getting an emotional response to that. What are you then trying to do as a mastering engineer?
Well, the issue that we still have, even though everyone's telling me, we need to go quieter, but still everyone's asking for loudness, is about transferring it and making it louder with keeping the integrity of the mix. And when I do workshops, I often play sort of mixes that, I deem when I've played them in the room that were amazing and like, wow, how can I make it better? Spike, for instance, mixes from him, they sound incredible. He's very much got a particular style. So it's about enhancing, I see it in a sense that when you're mixing, you're pulling everything together, and creating, something that's, quite, glue. You're bringing glue to all the different elements. And then when we come to mastering, it's about just opening it up a bit more. So I'll be thinking about, okay, what does this song need to evoke in me? Is it supposed to make me cry? Okay. And then it's generally going to be about the delivery of the vocal. If there's a vocal in there, if we look at general public, most people will listen to the vocal. It's only, people more like us that are going to go more into, what the musicians are doing, for instance, that are going to be more, intellectual about it. So I'll spend a lot of time making sure that the vocal delivery is where it needs to be, and trying to keep the integrity of it, because it's very easy to change the delivery of a vocal with EQ, with the limiters that I use, depending, even the gain structuring, can change, the way the vocal delivers. So I'll be checking that along the way to make sure that I'm getting all of that and hopefully enhancing it.
Thank you. So,
Leah, a good, good examples of that is for me. So I grew up through the punk era. So if we think about Iggy Pop and the Stooges, their mixes, if we listen to them in the studio, they're awful, they're horrible. But yet emotionally, if we hear them out, they do everything they need to do. It's really thinking about that. What does this track need to do? And depending on the style of music, depends on I see it like a box sometimes. It needs to fit in with other things that are going on. In the when it's played in a playlist, is it going to sit okay with the other style, other music in that style of music that we're working on? So there's a lot that goes on, to think about.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, so we over to Leah for some student questions, just for a little break.
Hi, Leah.
Hi. We've got someone asking what your opinion on AI mastering services are.
Okay, well, they are what they are. But, you know, we're just talking about emotion. The thing is about artificial intelligence is the machine is not going to understand emotion. So because you tick boxes, you know, will determine what the machine is going to do for that piece of music. So it's never going to be me. It's never going to be able to replace how I personally interact with that piece of music, how I hear it, and the choices I'm going to make. It does intrigue me, but how does it know, you know, what that vocalist needs to do? Is it going to be able to say when I'm mastering a tune, yeah, and I might, you know, the chorus might come in and I think, oh, you know, I need to make that a bit louder, or, you know, the intro, I'm going to edit the intro. It's just going to take that track and put algorithms on it based on the boxes you tick, you know. So there's a place for it, I suppose, in the sense of, you know, people haven't got money to go to a mastering room. They can get this done very cheaply, but it's not going to be me.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. You mentioned earlier that when you started your career, you did cut vinyl, and somebody asked if you could give a brief overview of how you do that.
How do you cut vinyl? Well, the thing is, it's very physical. So it's very much the same as anything, but we have physical constraints to worry about. So you'll often be taught to, for instance, keep your bass end of your mixes mono, you know, because the vinyl won't be able to cope if you have too wide a stereo in bass. You know, if you think about physically what you're trying to do, you're cutting your left and right into one groove. You know, and you know, if we say bass, which is what takes up the most, you know, sort of space and has the biggest movement on the vinyl, if we're asking it to do extremities, it's not going to be able to do it, and it's going to create sausaging. It won't be, you know, a groove like this, you know, it going flat, it will go, you know, in and out, which can cause a jumping record. If you've got too much top end or too much sibilance on the vocal, that's going to distort. So it's very much about thinking, you know, about what you're hearing inside the mix and whether it's going to fit onto a vinyl. So we'll have to, you know, maybe de-ess the stuff, put a high pass filter on it, low pass filter on it, mono the bass. Then it's very dependent on how long the track is, you know, or the album is going to be dependent on how loud we can cut the vinyl. So it's, yeah, it's very different to any other medium. And yes, I have blown a few cutting heads and they're very expensive to repair. Last time was £9,000, so we don't like doing it. Yeah, so, so yeah, and the thing is, yeah, we cut the master lacquer, and then it go to the factory. And if any of you have watched, there's some incredible videos out there of the pressing plant and all the processes it goes through from leaving the cutting room. I mean, it can go wrong at so many places. So it really is, when they say mastering, the dark art, you know, the black magic, you know, all of this side of it, they really refer to the cutting of vinyl, because even after 30 years experience, I can roughly guess what's going to happen, but I'm not 100%. And I think that is part of the fun of it. Mm-hmm.
Mandy, just expand a little bit on formats. How does the process differ for any other deliverable formats? So when we're delivering for streaming or CD, do you do anything different, or just supply one master and there you go?
It really depends on the budget of the team. Unfortunately, we've just become cheaper and cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. And part of the issue is more and more, you know, engineers are coming into the industry, and, you know, it's something that I've been talking a lot about over the past few years, this free mentality. So what's happened is people aren't charging as much money as they should. So, you know, you can get a track mastered by somebody in the, you know, probably production room in their house for £20, you know. Now, I couldn't run my studio on £20, and it's something I've been, you know, talking to educators about, doing a module for students, you know, of if they had to hire a production room, how much it would cost them, so that they can really start getting an idea of costs on this, you know, and how much they should be charging. So the issue you have is the money isn't there for you to do loads of deliverables. very easily. So if the money's there, yes, we would sort of view doing different things for different deliverables. Now with the vinyl, sometimes it's better to have a more dynamic version. We're going to get a better, response off the vinyl. Sometimes it's better to use, the more sort of compressed stuff. So it really, again, depends on the music. It's a lot of exploration. So if the budget's there, then that's fine. But if the budget isn't there, then we'll just have to deliver, one deliverable. It's something that I've been discussing with Louis, my junior engineer, about, how we could set things up to deliver, different things, but it's so complicated. As we know, if we look at all the streaming platforms, I mean, there's like 6 dB difference, to what they want us to deliver. Now, if we think about digital audio, we can hear 0.1 of a dB difference. It's going to give us a phase shift. It's going to change everything in the mix. So it's really hard to go, okay, how would we deliver, say 6, 7, 8 different, formats to go across CD, and some of the platforms, and bearing in mind that we're delivering a high resolution WAV. Well, actually, I'll deliver all of them. So I'll deliver a 96K 24-bit, 48K 24-bit, 44, 24, 44, 16, because some of the digital distributions, especially a smaller one, they're going to do their own sample rate conversion. Well, any of us that have explored that are going to tell you, that changes your dynamics so much in the sound. Some of them will just drop from 24-bit to 16-bit, they won't do noise shaping, it's my choice how I bring the 24 to 16-bit. It shouldn't be anyone else's choice. So it's really about trying to deliver the production teams I work with the best tools for them going forward to the digital platforms, because I hear things that we've mastered and they sound incredible, on YouTube, on, sort of Apple Music, whatever, Tidal, Spotify. And then other things will sound terrible. And then you start questioning, well, why? Why is that? But we're reliant on the digital distribution to do the codec. So, yeah, nobody's QCing them. And of course, in mastering, it's always been about QCing. With the vinyl, we ask now, we always ask to get a TP back here when, test pressing for us to do the quality control. When I started, the test pressings would automatically come back to the mastering engineer. The mastering engineer would have to say, okay, that's acceptable before it went to the production team. But of course, through the bedroom production or the DJs, that stopped happening. So the quality control of sound, if you like, got taken away from us, in the 90s, very much so.
Thank you. Leah?
This could link back to the cost thing that you mentioned earlier, but Raven asked, can you give some examples of what would make you choose a specific tool, like a compressor? Is it genre or sonic? What would make you choose a specific tool?
You see, so yeah, I come from a background of transfer. So the first thing that I will always do is just listen, and think, if I was to transfer this flat, how does it cover all the points? I have a huge arsenal of tools, but I very much start with gain structuring, because often you can do a lot with, especially if you're coming from digital to analog, with the gain structuring through the transformers in the analog gear. So I often mess around with that and get my level first before I even think about what I need to do in any other way. So I'll get the level in analog, and then I'll bring in the digital limiters. So I'll get everything working on the board at a particular level, probably going up to maybe +2, +3 on the VUs, and then bring it into the digital limiters, and again, depending on the style of music, will depend on the settings I use and what limiters I use. So but my EQs, the EMI on the transfer console, and I have inward connections, EQ that's, a bit more of a doctor EQ. And then I use some digital EQ if I really need to sort of doctor a mix, But I'm very much about do a lot with the gain staging first, because that can change your sound a lot and change your tone and, the way the dynamics respond.
There's a lot of questions about the sort of tools you might use. If you had a limited budget, what order of priority would you choose to buy your equipment in? And then further to that, equivalent plugins where people trying to get into mastering, what might they use?
Okay, so to me, your most important thing is what you're listening to. So to me, it would be your converter and your monitors. Put as much money into your monitors and your converters. And then, look at software, every software. And this is pretty out there, but people are starting, I've said it since the beginning of DAWs, but people are starting to, get on the page with me. Is each DAW sounds different, has a different tonal quality. So think about what DAW you're going to use. So for me, very much monitors, converter to begin with, and then plugins. I mean, there's great packages out there. I mean, I'm quite, I suppose, fussy with the plugins. So plugins that I go for, I like the Stephen Slate stuff. I think the team of guys that program that are quite phenomenal. They do some really interesting things, that bring color. I mean, all plugins bring color, all DAWs do, but I just like what they do. I can get some really interesting, I can beef up a mix, for instance, with his FG limiter side of it. I really like the Sony Oxford stuff. It's quite, if we say neutral, I suppose it's more pleasing. It hasn't got a huge color, even though it does have a color. But that's really good. I really like some of the Brainworks stuff. But of course, all the plugins that I'm using, I suppose, are quite expensive. So maybe look at, some of the UAD stuff. I mean, it's not, necessarily something that I would pick to put in my room, but functionality, it's great. But my attitude, I suppose, coming from a very punk rock place, and bearing in mind that, I have mastered on really shitty equipment and inside the box, in hotel rooms, with headphones. I mean, to me, it's not about the gear. It's about how you hear. So I'd say to you, really spend a lot of time, listening to music, ask around, ask people, what do you think is a great production? So I have a huge arsenal of tracks from, loads of different artists, all genres, that are reference tracks for me that I deem to sound really good. It's about listening a lot in a very controlled environment. So you're monitoring, listening to a huge amount of music that's well produced. And then when you start mixing and you're referencing these stuff, I always say this, they're very loud, don't, bring it down 6 dBs. Often with some of the bigger production teams, the better mix engineers I'm working with, I'll be bringing it up, sort of 6-8 dBs, from their mix. So if you're referencing something that is very loud, bring it down, so that you're not trying to chase this loud level. But very much to me, it's about your monitoring, is the most important thing, and listening to a ridiculous amount of music and thinking about the version. I had an interesting one with a young producer where you brought all these reference tracks, and some of them, I mean, sort of 90s club classics that I cut. So I know what the original sounds like, very much so. And the versions he had that he'd got, he downloaded were awful. The codecs were awful. So really maybe go around and listen to the different codecs, over the different platforms and see which one sounds better. Because I was quite shocked at how appalling this version sounded.
Thank you. We've got so many questions in the chat room that I'm going to keep running to Leah.
Yeah, Leah.
So carrying on from the Slate stuff that you mentioned with colour, somebody asked with the Slate Digital modelling software on the microphones that they make, have you had any experience working with them, and how do they compare to regular microphones?
I'm a mastering engineer. You know, I have one microphone. Oh, Ginger's in. There might be a cat fight. Hold on, my neighbour's cat's coming. I have a pink microphone, you know, but I don't have microphones, so I don't know. But based on what some of my friends are telling me, here we go, that they're really good. Again, you know, I really am of the attitude that it's not about tools. It really is how you interact with tools, you know, because I've heard, you know, the most incredible sounding stuff on, you know, what was deemed at the time some of the worst, you know, sort of software. You know, when Fruity Loops was out, you know, first came out, people said it was terrible. Even people used to not like Ableton when it first came out, but I'd hear the most incredible things through them. So it's really about how you interact with them, especially if you've studied, you know, you're all at uni, you've got great lecturers, you know, and they're teaching you how to listen to different things. It really is about, you know, taking everything you're learning and just keep expanding. I'm still learning. You know, we never stop learning, and we never stop learning on how to listen and interact with listening. So it really is about just, keep listening to other productions, you know, have lots of breaks and test everything, see whether it works for you, because everything's different. I always say, don't say that you don't like a piece of gear. It just doesn't work in my system at this moment in time. If I had another room, it might work.
If you could request one thing off mix engineers that are sending you their tracks to master, what would it be?
Do not mix into a limiter, please. Yeah? Do a mix. Yeah. If you need to do a pseudo mastering, bounce it out and then do it like we would do it, you know, because I'm not going to have your mix and put a limiter on. So don't mix into, you know, your like your stereo bus with, you know, a mastering chain on it. You know, get rid of that idea. It works for some production teams, but I think when you're learning, you know, it's better to achieve it without that. Mm-hmm. So does that help? Did that answer the question? I'm not sure.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you. A lot of questions about using hardware versus software and what you found the differences to be and the main pros and cons and which one's your favourite.
So, say that again.
A lot of questions about the pros and cons of using hardware over software.
They're just different. Yeah, I mean, often I will use software more to fix things that I think are wrong in the mix. Yeah, as opposed to hardware are often used to create more depth and space. Yeah, it's a lot harder for me to do that. I suppose, just the way I've learned inside the box. It's becoming easier. The tools are getting better. They are getting a lot better now for me to be able to achieve it inside the box. But yeah, you know, for me, I suppose, the software side of it, you know, if I'm using plugins, is very much about, you know, creating, you know, and getting the mix more where I want it to be before I start. You know, doing my gain staging and getting there. Often I will transfer things, I suppose, relatively flat through, you know, my analog system. Yeah, and then, you know, I might be sort of doctoring the mix, fixing the bass end, stuff like that, you know, inside the box. You know, the biggest problem I have today is where people, you know, working inside bedrooms, you know, and producing stuff like this, is that the bass is wrong. They're not hearing the sub bass. They don't know how to mix, you know, and often it'll come in here and it'll just be like, and you won't actually hear the track. And so there's a lot of to and fro to try and get, you know, young producers and engineers to deliver a mix where the bass is correct. So I have ideas about it. You know, I often say to them, you know, most of them, you know, have friends that are DJs. Go into clubs, play it on a club system, you know, check your mix on a club system. You know, it might show you a bit what's going on in that low end, because, you know, everyone's got the small speakers, and we see all these great mix engineers around the world mixing, you know, on these, you know, sort of, you know, small to mid-range speakers. They don't have full range speakers like we have in a mastering room. So, but all these mix engineers that we see doing this, you know, have a lot of experience and know how to deal with the bass end compared to, you know, say young bedroom producers. So yeah, the biggest thing is to try and learn and understand your bass, I think.
I think pulling back to some of the questions, if you were going to start again, Mandy, all the gear behind you, which you probably accrued over years and years and years, are there some way you go, I could not live without that, and others where you go, well, actually, I've got a plug-in equivalent that would do it?
No, to me, gear's gear. To me, I really, you know, I suppose I'd get shouted down by a lot of people, but, you know, I think it's not about the tools, it's about my ears. You know, my thing is to be in control. So, you know, for instance, I've done crazy things like, you know, that a master engineer doesn't normally do, where I've gone into other people's studio, taken over, you know, set the rig up and mastered inside there. You know, very famous one is working with Bjork, you know, going up to Adhd room. So we're back to the references. I have a huge arsenal of references. So wherever I go, I will sit and listen to the monitors. And yeah, it's back to monitoring. If I'm in control of what I'm hearing, then I can, you know, achieve anything. Okay, it might take me longer than if, you know, on my tools, I know them inside out, I can work quite quickly. You know, if it's other tools that I don't know, I'm going to have to explore a lot more to find what I'm looking for. But to me, yeah, tools are tools. You know, it's just like, you know, if you, you need to put a nail in a wall, you know, it's okay, you could have a really expensive hammer or you could have a cheap hammer, but you'll go and do the best you can with whatever tool you've got. To me, it's that same theory. Your best thing is about being in control of what you're listening to. So we're back to monitoring.
That's a good reassuring message, I think, for our students who are maybe starting out. So learn your monitors and have reference tracks which enable you to translate what you're doing. So a lot of people are asking, and I know the answer is very personal, but in terms of any reference tracks that you've got, for any reasons you've got them, could you share a couple of
okay, they're terrible, but yeah, you know, it's just what I know. So I'll listen to things like AC/DC for those about to rock, for the snare hit, because it's very fast. And in fact, this was one of the things that I loved. You can't see the barefoots because they're behind, they're over here. But it was one of the things that I loved about the barefoots MM27s was the speed at which they worked. You know, I heard things in AC/DC when it came to compression that I'd never heard my whole life in them. But I really like that snare hit for speed and attack time. So that'll tell me a lot about the speakers, you know, in the mid-range, and, you know, how fast they're responding. I'll listen to Yo-Yo Ma and Bobby McFerrin. You know, he's a cello player, Bobby McFerrin, incredible vocalist, huge range, but they did this album together that has got particular reverb decays. So again, I'll listen to that to hear, you know, how far down the resolution of the speakers go, the system go, you know, how much detail I can hear in that. Or listen to sort of Michael Jackson, Bob Marley, again for sort of bass response, what's going on in the bass end. Christina Aguilera, Dirty, you know, that track. I remember being at the Exchange, and Simon that was working with us, you know, there at the time, brought this track in because he was just fascinated at the mastering at it, and he had producers that were talking about it. And I remember all of us sort of being pinned, you know, when it came out of the speakers. It was like, what the fuck? So I still use that as a reference because it needs to be aggressive and nasty and pin me to the wall. And if it's too nice and soft and not doing what it needs to do, I know I've got issues with the monitoring. I mean, you know, I will take over a room and reset up the monitors, you know. Being in control of my monitor level. I mean, you know, on my monitor controller, I have lots of marks, you know, all measured, you know, for different things. So this, you know, this is my normal listening level. This is a quieter setting. This is a louder setting. So it's very much being in control of what you're hearing to begin with. So the reference is, it needs to be across the board to tell you everything, to tell you the frequency response of the speakers. So it might be that there's not one track that does that. Like I say, Bob Marley, it's about groove. I need to hear all the notes. Reggae for me is a particular music because they spend so much time working on the bass, and getting clarity in all the notes. So that's something that I'm looking for. Can I hear everything? How I know it, and just playing it across everything. Every sort of speaker. When I was learning at the Exchange, I remember working with Adhd from So Solid Crew. It was when he was in prison, and I was doing his album. And in America, we were sort of at the Exchange. We were really at the sort of forefront of loud cuts, all this sort of crazy stuff. And during, that era, America started to work in a particular way. A lot of the American engineers that we didn't really understand at the Exchange. So I remember with the Adhd, burning CDs and taking it out to this terrible little boombox and just playing it. And I mean, we'd start work at 10 in the morning. I didn't start mastering that album till about 6 at night, because I spent all day just trying to find where I was going to start to get the same energy coming out of what I was mastering with these tracks as these CDs that I had from America. So it's about a lot of exploration. You have to remember, we're scientists. We're scientists of sound. People forget that. So many people sort of learn the system and they just go on to a rote thing doing the same thing. They forget to explore. It's constantly a journey of exploration. Like I say, I'm still learning. I'm still sort of changing how I work. I'm still questioning how I work. How can I make it better? It's science.
Thank you, Mandy. Just before we move on to another question, you mentioned your 3 reference points in terms of your monitoring levels. How did you arrive at those and why?
Well, the industry standard, and then it was just about setting up the system where I felt comfortable. So again, when I installed the system, it was sort of probably 4 days of setting up the gain staging, the converters, how they were working, to get the speakers to do what I wanted, a bit like when I went up to Addy's in Iceland, when I worked with Bjork, and, I went in there and I spent the morning setting up his monitoring system. I mean, he was so gracious, because if somebody had come into my room wanting to do that, I probably would have punched them, but he just let me go with it and respected me, which was lovely. But to me, it's very much about how I'm hearing. That's why for me, the most important thing is your monitoring, being in control of what you're listening to. Because if you're in control, you can do anything.
Thank you. Leah?
With that, would you suggest bringing a DB monitor to each studio you go to? Or
I take a monitor controller when I go into another studio normally, or I'll ask them what they've got, and then go in there, because it's quite quick to set them up anyway. So often it'll be, get a list of what they've got. You often find mix engineers will take, their main speakers into different mix rooms, and it's quite interesting, sort of listening to some of the top guys out there, and what they look for, what they like to work on, when it comes to mixing. I don't care. I'll go in there, but I'll ask what they've got.
Yeah. Thank you. How often do you trial new gear in your studio, or do you feel like you have your kit set up exactly how you like? Is there anything you're looking at upgrading or replacing at the moment?
Yeah, no, I'm constantly looking at new gear. I do have some issues with the distribution companies over here, and then what the EU did, because some of the equipment that I would want, we can't get, because it would be interesting to see what happens now with Brexit. But because in America, a lot of the guys are still using lead solder. They can't sell into the UK because of it. So I'm quite into boutique audio. I'm quite into different things, but I listen to a lot of things, and have been very blessed to be able to lend my ears to help develop, different equipment, different software, streaming platforms. Been very honoured with, some incredible, engineers that I look up to be involved in that. So, constantly listening, hearing things, go to other people's studio where they show me gear that they bought, I'll get to mess around with it. Always, I'll go out to the AES in America, if I can, to go meet the guys that are making the equipment, hear what they've got, maybe get it in here on trial, give feedback, But like I say, I think it really depends on your room, what's going to work,
Thank you.
Elliot asked, I can never get my master sounding loud enough. What would be the main thing to look out for when trying to achieve this?
You can't get your masters. Are you mixing as well? Is she mixing as well?
I think this is just mastering.
Just mastering. So here's the thing with the loudness side of it, Sometimes you might need to ask them to address the level on their mix, maybe the mix doesn't sound loud. Maybe the mix hasn't been worked enough for you to achieve the loudness. But I will use, maybe 3 limiters, if I'm really struggling to get the level, I won't just use 1 limiter, and the most that I do on any limiter, and that's extreme for me, is I'll set the threshold at 2 dB. But normally it's 1.3, 1.5, 1.7, maybe 0.7. It really depends. But I will not try and do something with one thing. You
so you do a little bit on 3 processors.
Yeah, but you really have to be careful, of what's happening with your dynamic range there. You've got to really listen, really. Because you can really sort of mess up the drums and stuff, quite easily with doing that.
Mandy, really on the loudness wars. Do you struggle with if mixers often send a reference track to the bands or artists with a compressor or a limiter on the output just for a reference? Do you often struggle matching that in mastering because bands and artists think loud is best?
Well, yeah, and because often they're putting it on their mix bus and I don't have the mix. So, it's a great experiment you guys can do is, putting a limiter on your mix bus, on your mix, and then bouncing your mix out and bringing it back in. Beware of Logic if you're working on Logic. Make sure if you bring a stereo file into Logic that your pan law is set up on 0. That's bitten me in the butt, because it's obvious. Most of the time, I think they ship it with -3 on the pan law inside Logic. So really think about that if you're bringing it back into master, because that's going to change the sound quite a bit. But yeah, go explore it like that, and you'll see some of the challenges we have with what you're sending us when you're putting that limiter on your mix bus. And often, I'm quite shocked when I ask mix engineers what they've set their limiter up at, and I think one of them, he had it, the threshold was 16 dB, and I was like, well, I'm never going to do that. That's so extreme. So it's really thinking about, what you're doing there to get the loudness. And it's such a shame, like I'm saying, this whole sort of cheap attitude of, people expecting to do test mixes for nothing, and they're not going to get paid, unless the mix is used. I mean, what a ridiculous, thing to expect, not only, I'll get asked, I won't do anything for free. I think there should always be a fair exchange. So yeah, it's thinking about that side of it. What these mix engineers do. So yeah, I think putting it on your mix bus, can cause a lot of problems going forward, unless that's what you're going to deliver and it's not going to go through to mastering. Often when they've done that, what I'll ask for is a version that's quieter, but with the processing on it. If they have mixed in that way and mixed into a limiter, it's like, okay, can you send me another version, but bring your output down, because it's changed the dynamics so much. Often they take the limiter off and the mix falls apart. I'll sit here and go, well, what's going on? you know, this mix is disjointed because they've taken away the glue because they've mixed into it.
Yeah.
But because they're being told, oh, don't send it to mastering with the limiter on. But sometimes it's brought tone, it's brought glue, it's changed dynamics so much that I have to say to them, okay, leave it on, but I need a quieter version, you know, so I've got a little bit to play with because it's too loud, it's clipping on my system. Often, again, we're back to monitoring, you know, you're not hearing the clipping. If you're not hearing, you know, the subs really well, you know, you're going to be clipping down there. And it could cause problems. Another thing is clicks and pops, you know, if you're not hearing all the sub, you know. Louis just had a project that he worked on where, you know, they'd heard the clicks, you know, through the mixing, but of course where they're on little speakers, they didn't sound very, very big, you know, but in here they were huge, you know, there was a huge amount of sub inside these clicks, you know, so he had to go in, you know, get rid of the clicks, you know, before he could start mastering. So it's thinking about that, how it's going to go and work.
Thank you.
Linking straight to that, actually, we had Andrew Sheps in for a talk in December, and he was saying how with heavy rock records, he sometimes limits on the master bus because that's what brings the sound. How would you go about mastering something like that?
So, yeah, again, it's back to game staging. I was lucky to have Andy Sneeps come to cut the vinyl of the last Judas Priest record, you know, and he masters all his own stuff, you know. In fact, I've got a couple of colleagues that, you know, will master their own stuff because they weren't happy with mastering engineers. So it's really interesting talking to them. Yeah, and of course I had Andy's mixes, yeah, and I had his mastered versions, if you like. His mastered versions are just his mix with a limiter on it, you know? And, you know, we talked about his settings and stuff. The thing is, we're still in this thing that, you know, people want it loud. I don't want them to want it loud, but it's what we've chased since the beginning of recorded audio, isn't it? You know, is to get more level, to get it louder. So again, you're back to the box, you know, like I said earlier, you know, every genre of music, you know, has a particular window that it needs to work with other stuff, you know, if it's played on the radio. So, you know, if it's going, you know, if it's heavy rock and it's being played on a rock station, it needs to stand up next to everything else. So your reference point has got to be, you know, the other music in that genre of stuff. So you're back to your referencing and, you know, thinking about what sounds good and how loud you need to go. To me, there is no right or wrong, you know, but it's just thinking about if it is going to go out there to other people, other master engineers, speak to them about what they want, because some master engineers will just go, we'll bring it down 6 dB. That's what I want. I want it, you know, 6 dB down. I want it 3 dB down from 0. To me, I don't ask for that. I say, use your ears, you know, because like I say, we can hear 0.1 of a dB down, 0.1 of a dB up. So, you know, think about that it's doing what it needs to do.
Thank you.
I mean, rock's a particular, you know, I think out of all the different genres of music, for me, working on metal, you know, can be some of the most challenging because you've got a very particular picture, you know, that it needs to fit in the world of rock music, you know, and of course they want it very loud. And, you know, it can be very hard to process it through mastering, you know, without messing up, you know, the dynamics, especially with the double kick drum. I mean, you know, it can be a real pain in the butt to master, you know, to keep everything where it needs to be, you know, as opposed to experimental electronic music, which, you know, can be a lot easier because, you know, it's it's a much bigger sonic window of what we need to deliver to.
Thank you.
Going back to the bedroom producers you mentioned earlier for doing it themselves, do you think mastering for electronic music is less in demand than other genres, or is demand generally pretty equal across all genres?
Pretty equal, I'd say. I work on every style from classical to punk. Yeah. Mm. I don't think it's really sort of viewing this, what the role of the master engineer is as an objective set of ears, you know. I mean, some people want to master their own stuff. They want to, you know, sort of make the music, you know, mix the music, you know, produce the music and master the music because they've got a very clear vision. It doesn't mean that, you know, it's going to be right and works, but they want that sort of control. But I really like the idea of, you know, having the objective set of ears. So often I'll say to students that, you know, haven't got money to explore that. Well, you know, you're working with different, you know, people in the studio, you know, you're studying with different people, you know, if you resonate with somebody, ask them to master your tracks, you know, and you master their tracks and explore it that way. You know? It's most people don't decide to become a mastering engineer. It's really interesting when you talk to mastering engineers, it's just something that happened. You know, there's not many people that actively go, I want to be a mastering engineer. It's often something that's not thought about. It's something that's quite hard for the universities to teach because it's a bit more abstract, the approach. Yeah, we can teach about the equipment and the tools that we use, but you're not going to learn about the psychology behind, you know, walking into a room, you know, and what happens inside the dynamic of a studio. It's something that's really become apparent to me, you know, and really interesting because I grew up inside a studio with a lot of engineers. Lots of people are coming up inside their bedrooms. They forget about the psychology of a team and knowing your place and what is acceptable to say and not acceptable to say. So yeah, it's a really interesting concept. But I think when you're studying, if you can't go to mastering, is swap tracks with people and get them to master it, you know, see what they think about when they approach it to master it, you know, what comes up for them that are the problems.
That's a good idea. Yeah.
Do you have any experience working in immersive audio, and if so,
Yes.
what changes your approach to mastering?
Right, it's yeah, I was really was it lucky? I don't know whether it was lucky because it was a real pain, you know, to work with Bjork on the VR. It was incredible what she did. We were at the forefront of, you know, sort of sound, especially when it came to complex audio, you know, like a musical artist doing an album. So we did 360 and we did VR. It was the thing is with that side of it, it's you can't master everything. So what we discovered was I needed to think about key elements and master them, you know, so especially Bjork's vocal, processing it in the way that I would, you know, with the stereo, because her thing was she wanted the same emotional energy coming through as the album that we'd already worked on. We had to, you know, go back and dissect the whole mix. You know, because of course her process of working, there was a lot of stereo files which didn't really work for us. You know, we needed, you know, a lot more mono files to get what she was looking for out of it. And then the hardest thing was, yeah, the codecs. Oh my God, they're awful. Yeah, absolutely awful. And some of the plugins that we had to work with that she'd agreed to use, you know, did not make it easy. You know, we had to find a lot of workarounds. We broke Pro Tools during the process, you know, and had to find workarounds with that, you know, because we needed to use the latest version of Pro Tools, and some of the plugins that we had to use, you know, caused a conflict inside there. So it would cause Pro Tools to corrupt the files, you know, so it was a pain in the butt, but incredible. But yeah, to wear the headset because, you know, we had direction stuff to worry about because we had the videos. And yeah, different formats. Like I say, the 360, where she had 360 films, you know, they were easier to work with. The 360 immersive audio was a lot easier than, say, working with the VR stuff where you could move around inside, you know, so the sound, you know, we had to think about the reverb on Bjork's voice, you know, as you got closer to it, it become drier, you know, things like that, you know, working with that side of stuff. Quite fascinating, a lot of hours. Not something I'd overly advertise to jump into, yeah, if that makes sense. But yeah, very interesting, very, I think, an exciting format. I'm excited to see where they've got to because we had a lot of problems with the direction of stuff inside it, you know. So it was great in the sense of games, film, you know, but when it came to music where we needed really very tight direction, you know, on Bjork's vocal, we really struggled trying to get the algorithms to work with that.
From your personal preference, what are your top 3 best sounding records of the past 5 years sonically?
Oof. I have no idea.
Are there any 3 over the last 3 years that you made, 4 or 5 years that you've worked on that you've gone, this is just...
Well, I did. I really. I did.
It's personal,
Yeah,
isn't it? But
I liked. Yeah, but it's tracked, you know. So I really liked some of the Richard Russell stuff.
yeah,
I did enjoy working with Glass Animals on their first album. You know, the Max Richter Sleep project, you know, the 8-hour project was quite incredible to work on. I think sound-wise, you know, really liked working on the Feist last album. I thought that was, you know, it was really fun to work with her, and we did some really interesting things in the mastering with that to get that where she wanted. But I suppose, yeah, I don't sort of think about it in that sense, you know. I listen to music. I mean, you'd laugh. I do. I listen to music most of the time for pleasure on my phone. You know, I'm so punk rock, you know, I came from punk rock, you know, just playing music on whatever, listening to it on whatever. And what happened after studying, I became so anal about good sound to the point that I couldn't experience anything without dissecting it and, you know, questioning what they'd done and why did it sound like that. And when I moved to New Orleans, I was hearing the most incredible musicians on the worst sounding systems. And it reminded me of my love for actually music, you know, for performance, for music. It actually didn't matter what we heard it on. If the performance was there, which it was, because these musicians were incredible, yeah, but the system sounded shit. And that brought me back to when I was younger, where I just loved music. It didn't matter what I heard it on, you know, because it was about the emotion. It got back to pure emotion. So great sounding records, yeah. I suppose, I don't really think about it in that way, you know.
Mandy, is it difficult to master things you're more emotionally invested in than some stuff that you don't quite like artistically? It's just another job. Is it easier when you've got that distance?
No, I have to understand it emotionally. I mean, I often talk about working with Aphex Twin with his comeback record, you know, and of course, you know, I'd known Richard for years. He used to come to Exchange. He's somebody that, you know, had been around my professional, you know, career a lot. And it took me a lot to connect with that emotionally, you know, because techno, even though I've worked with some of the most incredible techno artists, it took me a lot. It took them to sort of teach me, yeah, about that style of music. I found it, you know, it was very, a bit too technical for me in a sense, you know. But then when I did connect with it, you know, which I realized, I kept getting up in the morning and coming in and playing it. So to me, you know, what Aphex taught me was about time. You know, I ended up mastering it through the night after working with an indie band all day. And the band had been in here and they were young and I felt very claustrophobic. And I knew, you know, when we sort of finished that, you know, I'd be up for the next 4 hours where it was so intense. And I had Julian, an intern that was with me for a year, who's gone on to study acoustics and done some great things there now. And he was here and I said to him, do you fancy pulling an all-nighter with me? And he looked at me and he went, why? And I went, I think I'm going to do the Aphex record. And we came in the studio, you know, and I had my own little rave with it. So it was very much about a moment in time. But I'd keep getting up and pressing play and just not really being able to connect with it. But then, you know, after the day I had, you know, it was just like the most fun thing to go in and master it, you know, because it was just so, you know, it felt so free to me after this very claustrophobic day I had. So, yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's interesting about the headspace. Thank you. Leah?
What are your thoughts on automation in a mastering context? Are plugin settings set and left, or are you tweaking and riding the parameters throughout?
Really depends again on the mix. Sometimes I'll be riding them throughout. Other times it really depends on the mix, you know. And again, really sort of depends on the production team, you know. So some of the bigger teams I've worked with, I might not do that without opening the question. Or what I'll do is I'll just do a version straight without doing any tweaks, and then I'll do a version, you know, with tweaks that I feel it needs, and send both. You know, sometimes, you know, I might master things, you know, in 2 different ways, send them 2 different versions, you know, because I can't make a decision on, you know, a particular frequency area that I'm like, okay, I like it there for this, but I like it there for that. Okay, let's just do 2 and send it to them, you know. So yeah, you know, again, it's whatever you need to do. There's no right or wrong. But my suggestion with that, if you know the production team aren't with you to hear it, you're not sure about opening it up with them, because new relationships, you know, you can really step on toes if you start sort of going, I'm going to do this, that and the other, you know, when the whole team have signed off on it. If you think some production teams, I might have worked on an album, for instance, for 5 years, and all of a sudden you're going to come in and start changing things, you could really upset the apple cart, you know, with that. So what I would do in that instance is do one, you know, just straight, you know, without the automation, and then do one with automation and send it and say, look, I've done one like this. This was just, you know, sort of my take on it. And keep it open. Don't be precious. You know, I say to production teams, you can't offend me. You know, I'm here to realize the artist's dream. You know, if I go in a particular direction and you don't like it, just tell me, I'll change it. You know, there's no, like, we're back to there's no right or wrong. You know, there's what, you know, people, their interpretation. You know, the artist, producer are going to have a clear thought about what they want. You know, I might not get that, you know, from when I'm working on it. So I might go in a particular direction. I had it with a very good friend of mine, rock artist, you know. He'd done this album, incredible album. I'd gone very modern on the mastering. And he was really embarrassed to come back. He's one of my best friends, you know, we've known each other since teenager, but he was embarrassed to come in and say that he didn't like what I'd done. And actually wanted a lot more, you know, sort of like a classic rock sound than a very modern sound. So it's just about making sure that people feel comfortable with being able to say to you, look, I'm not sure about this, you know, can we explore that? Yeah, and opening a dialogue, if that makes sense, you know. You're a tool. Like I say, I'm a hammer, a screwdriver, a spanner, whatever. I'm a tool for the production team, for the artists to realize their art into, you know, the world. I see it like birth. I have a couple of clients that see it like death. You know, they say it's the death of their music, because once it's out there, there's no more changing it. But it really is. You're birthing this product. You know, nobody's heard it. This is, if it's not right when it leaves us, it's never going to be right. So my big thing at the moment with all this streaming stuff, because we're in such a grey area, is saying to production teams, you know, if you get it up on any platform and it doesn't feel right, loop us in. Let us hear it. Let's, you know, open it up. Let's change it. You know, let's make sure it's doing what it needs to do. Because like I'm saying, yeah, 6 dB difference between streaming. It might work on one thing and not on something else.
Thank you, Mandy.
Do you find yourself often working with groups or for extra sets of ears, or do you find it's easier once you've just got your own ears to focus in on?
I will encourage people to come to a mastering, but no, it's my ears, my room, my ears. You know, I will listen to what they're looking for, but often they won't overly influence me through the day. If I've got people that are a bit worried at the beginning of the session, I would advise them to bring headphones they know, you know, laptops, whatever, where bounce the tracks out, you know, they can go check them. You know, if, you know, people are very nervous, you know, maybe we'll just do 1 or 2 tracks, get them to take it back, you know, and listen to it. I think, yeah, it's based on my ears. That's what they're paying for. They're paying for my interaction, my interpretation.
Good point. Mandy, can we look a little bit about, talk a little bit about mental health in the music industry? Obviously, over the last year, the creative industry has been hit hard. But as a freelancer generally in a creative area, it's very difficult to maintain good mental health. Have you got any
No,
experience
I
of that?
out. Yeah, I burnt out. I had a breakdown. So I was on a burnout, and my partner at the time and my family encouraged me to go away. So I did. I went away. And when I come back in my personal life, it exploded. Me and my partner ended up splitting up through a series of events, which triggered me into a breakdown. And what happened was it triggered complex PTSD. So, like I said, I was a runaway. Yeah, my parents, both incredible people, but yeah, were not adult enough to be bringing up a child, basically. And it was a very aggressive, violent childhood, which I blocked out. When I ran away, it was like I just shut that door. And what happened was through the breakdown, it triggered complex PTSD, which it's been really hard for me to get back to work. I'm at the tail end of it now. My father, who was my main predator, I'd say, from when I was in my mother's womb, died last year. So, I went through a lot a couple of months after that. I just actually got back to work when, he got ill and died. And when you're going through PTSD, you're in fear, your body's in fear. So if you think when you're scared, your vision of everything needs to be very wide, because you're looking at what's going to attack you. And of course, our jobs are very hyper focused. It's very much about looking at little things. And I'd sit down to work and I couldn't work. I could not work because my body was in fear. So I had a lot of counselling. I've put myself in a lot of debt, trying to fix my head, because again, very hard on the NHS. For instance, the talking therapist that I was working with said, I want you to go and have an adult ADHD test. Very hard to do on the NHS, actually. There's not very many psychiatrists that do it, so the waiting list is very long. So I paid quite a few thousand to go get this test. And yes, of course, I am, off the rector, really ADHD. It's really helped me understand my life a lot more, and people, finding me a bit full on, because I get very excitable. But with the ADHD, we have the ADD side of it, so I discovered that. And it was that psychiatrist that explained to me, what's happened is you've triggered this complex PTSD, which has been a lot harder to deal with. The problem with the adult ADHD with mental health in the UK, you can only go to the mental health team that are in your area. So I can only deal with Waltham Forest mental health. You can't go outside. If, I needed to have an operation on my hand, I could pick any doctor in the UK and request to go see them. Mental health, you can't do that. Waltham Forest do not have a psychiatrist that can administer the medication for adult ADHD. Which, there's, I've read so much about it, was very anti trying the medication. But the more I realized with the sort of PTSD and talking to the different therapists that I was working with through it, we thought that it might be a good idea to try one of them that I could take when I needed it. So if I was having a particular anxious hyper day, I could take it and it would probably calm me down. But then, what's been really I believe that everything we experience in life, we experience for a particular reason, and then we end up being able to talk about it, and that helps other people find their way. So through my journey, I've started studying with a shaman. I had 2 shamans that I worked with, which is, a very other angle on psychology, what they do with you. It's very much empowering you to do something physical around what's going on in your head. Working with a psycho magician, but just realizing that, being self-employed, having my own room, having people that were reliant on me, where I'd come from working in a studio where I was very much a team player, not a boss, caused me a lot of stress. And I found it very hard to say no. if that makes sense. You're under this thing. There's so much competition out there that you're always saying yes, and you end up not having a life because you're just working so much, saying yes, 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 that it's so easy to burn out. And really thinking about, looking after your well-being through it. It's something that, this year, and towards the end of last year, really talking to different people about, having different tools in your arsenal to work. So I have a lot of tools around my ears, looking after my ears, giving myself breaks, what I can do when I have to work ridiculous hours, what little tricks I do, so I really look at my diet. Or go out for a lot of walks during the sessions to get more oxygen to my ear. Vitamin D supplements. I had a blood test and got told that I had abnormally low vitamin D. And then the more people I spoke to about it, they were like, oh yeah, we have that. Well, we're in rooms, we're in boxes. We're often working, I prefer working late at night. I've always been more of a night person than a morning person. So it's, I wouldn't be going out and experiencing, being outside a lot, especially, after, my dog died, not going out, walking her, not being outside. So thinking about that, resting your ears. What can you do? Sleep's really important. It's most of us, or experience some form of tinnitus, understanding that, if you go to your doctors and they give you antibiotics, think about looking at the side effects. Amoxicillin, one of the first side effects is tinnitus. How many people know that? It's not something we're taught. In fact, when I studied, I wasn't really taught anything about my ears, how they worked, how to rest them, what to think about. So I think, it's really important to think about well-being, and looking after ourselves, inside the studio, and stopping this yes thing. Like I say, a lot of us inside the industry do have ADHD, ADD. So we will sit on a board for 4 or 5 hours and not realize, So what I'm trying to do with say Louis is say to him, right, set an alarm. So every 40 minutes, you get up, you walk out of the studio, because you'll just get so into something that you forget, and then you'll go and burn out because you're just working too much. I really struggle with the jumping of, sort of doing artistic stuff and then doing, sort of the admin stuff. I really struggle. And then again, with the discovering through, having the breakdown, I'm not literate. It's like, I can do it, but it takes a hell of a lot of my energy, to do emails, to compose emails. I'm good at speaking. So the thing that I'm exploring at the moment is software that I can talk, that's going to type it for me. Because I realize that side of it really tires me. So it's understanding what makes you tired, what doesn't, what takes your energy, what doesn't.
Thank you, Mandy. Well, time is almost upon us, but we're going to end just by asking, if you were putting yourself in the shoes of an 18-year-old student wanting to get into mastering, what would be your parting advice for the student?
Try and find a mastering engineer to mentor you. I've been hit up a lot over the past couple of years of people wanting to pay me just to talk to me, which is a bit strange. Young people just because we all need people to guide us. So think about what mastering engineers do you really like? Go through the music that you're listening to and go, okay, this mastering engineer keeps coming up. This mastering engineer keeps coming up. Email them, see whether they've got lectures, out there, workshops that, they've done that you can go check out on YouTube, But I do think with the mastering, it's think about, who you like. It's like, okay, you could go read books, you could go watch all these YouTube videos from all these different people, but actually, do you respect their sound? Do you have anything in your music collection that they've mastered on? Yeah, and if the answer is no, why are you looking at them? It's the same with mix engineers. It's, we have so much information from so many different mix engineers, but they all work differently. So really hone in on the productions that you like, who the production teams are, who are the mix engineers, who are the producers, who are the mastering engineers, and start there. And don't give up. If you really want to do it, you've got to just fight for it. Your competition. I mean, it was hard enough for me, when I came into it, but we had so many studios then. Now we don't have the studios. The competition is fierce, and don't give it away for nothing. You're all studying, you're all spending money to study. We're professional people. If you think, 10 years studying, I'm still studying, we're the equivalent of doctors, lawyers, we just don't see it like that because we've come into an industry that's so creative. But stop giving it away for nothing, because what career do you think you're going to have if you keep doing it? It's just going to become a hobby. There aren't going to be jobs. There isn't going to be money. You're not going to be buying a house. You're not going to be buying the car. You're not going to have anything. You're going to have a day job, and this is going to be fun. Mandy, and that isn't what you want, So let's get professional, like really keep it professional, fair exchange, your time for something. So if bands haven't got money, I had one artist really wanting to work with me, and, we did a swap. He helped me with my website and I mastered his album. If there should be a fair exchange for anything in life, if you give your time. But remember, you're paying, to study. It costs a lot of money. Why should you then give it away for nothing? £20 to master a track. Do you think Bob Ludwig would charge that? Ted Jensen, any of these guys, Matt Colton, John Davis, let's look at the engineers here. Could they survive? Could the studios they're in survive at that? No. So get professional. Let's try and get some clear markers for you of what you should be charging for a mix, what you should be charging to master. I think the idea of doing a costing to set up a production room will really help you guys. If you think about that, if I had to rent a room, I had to pay insurance for my equipment, for my speakers, So it really, think about it professionally.
You, that's a really brilliant message to end on. So I know it's unusual because we've got a chat room rather than 200 students in front of you, but if everyone could show their appreciation with the clap icon, that would be really helpful. Thank you ever so much. So students, thank you ever so much for joining us. See you later on. And Mandy, if you stick around while the room empties, and we'll catch up in a minute or two. Okay. Thank you, everybody.
All right. Yeah, bye. Thanks for coming.